enums, one underused feature of Dart, or one that's not used to its full potential. And really, we need to get in the mindset of using enums more effectively in our code because it makes our code less error prone, more readable, easier to maintain. And we're going to look at a real scenario, a scenario that you've probably written, probably recently, probably multiple times, where you could be leveraging the power of enums, making it more stable, more robust, and less error prone. And so here's the scenario. I'm sure you've used it. I know I've done it before. You have a variable, in this case loading status, which holds one of, in this case, 3 states or values. It can either be idle, loading, or complete. Can't be anything else. One of 3 values, right? And so if we want to do something like get a status message based on what the status is, well, we might use a switch expression, right? Please don't use an if statement. If you're using an if statement in the situation, please stop. Switch expression, much cleaner, much better. And so we have this switch expression, we supply the status, the state, and based on each of the 3 values, well, we return a different message. Nice and simple. And then obviously, because strings are endless, they can be anything, well, we have to finish off the case by doing a default and making it an unknown status as used in this example. But there's a big issue with this, right? Perhaps you spotted 2 mistakes in this code that I made that we just looked over, right? For one thing, did you notice this, right? This is missing the L for complete, right? So what would happen if I had left this code like this and the status is complete, the user is viewing the UI, it would show unknown status, right? Because of one letter. But there's another letter that's also causing an issue, and that is this capital R.
It's a typo, don't you see? It's a typo!
Because we are checking for lowercase. We refer to lowercase everywhere. And so simple typos like this can cause big issues that can make things difficult to find. And so what's the solution? Well, what's our natural thinking? To use static consts, right? We declare all the possible strings at the top as variables, idle state, loading state, complete state, and then we always use one of these variables, right? And that's a beautiful solution.
I am too smart. I am too smart. S-M-R-T. I mean S-M-A-R-T.
Because what that means is no typos, no improper casing, everything will work as expected. And so does this mean it solves all our issues? Well, this is the best version we can do? Absolutely not.
What?
And there's a big reason for that. And the reason comes in when we want to change these available states or all the possible values, adding or removing, right? So in this case, we decided, okay, let me add error, right, as an additional state. But now what we might not realize at this point is that there's a switch expression somewhere else. Obviously it's easy in this case because it's small, but maybe it's somewhere else. There's a switch expression that switches on each of these variables. And so now by us adding this, well, we might forget to add it here, meaning that instead of showing an appropriate message for error to the user, it will just show unknown status. Again, an issue that we would then have to debug and try to find the issue. And so to always remember where these places are, to find these places, well, it might be a bit tricky.
Don't just complain, offer solutions.
And that is where enums come into play. This is its strongest feature. Enums are just short for enumerations. Now, how we declare an enum, if you've never used them before, enum, provide the name, and you list all those possible states or values. And then when we want to use it, well, we just call loading state dot and then the particular enum. So in this case, we save it to a variable like before. And now this switch expression, you'll notice, looks very similar. The only difference really is that we are using these const enum values for loading state, idle, loading, complete. And so just like this example, it eliminates any typos or issues like that. In fact, it's nice because it even will predict all the possible values that you can use. And it also removes this need for a default when using a switch expression or statement, because this switch knows that loading status, or the loading state enum, has only 3 values, and we've got a case for each of them. And so that's beautiful, right? But this is not really why we use enums. Why we use enums is for when we want to change one of these values. Just like before, we had that issue where we added error and now it caused an issue over here. Well, notice what happens in this case when I use an enum. If I add an error enum value, I should say, you notice what happens? Immediately I get a compiler error. This message highlights how this loading state error is not included, but it should be. And the reason why is because this switch expression knows that loading state has 4 possible values, but we've only provided cases for 3. So I will not be able to run this program until I provide a value for error. So in this case, I will provide a value, an error occurred. All is resolved, we're happy, no other issues. And so you'll even notice that later on, because this doesn't have that error as one of the cases, well, we're being moaned at there. And so this is the advantage. This is the core advantage of using an enum. It makes things maintainable, and when you add or remove values, you will see where you must change it in your code as well. But enums can do more than just that, right? If you look at this example, right, we've got a status message. We've now added a icon, a getter as well, to get an appropriate icon. But what you might be noticing is that for a single value of this enum, idle, its related data or values are spread across our code base, right? And so we cannot look at idle as an enum value and straight away know what is its message, what is its icon, right? In this case, it's simple because it's relatively small, but this can grow, this can be in various places. And that's where enhanced enums come into play. So here's an example of an enhanced enum. You'll notice that it's very similar to just a normal class, right? If I remove those sections, this is a normal class. Got variables, got a constructor, and it has even a getter. And you could have other methods as well. But because this is an enum, we use enum and we supply those particular enum values. Now you'll notice how this has changed. Rather than just a list of just plain names for the enums, we need to supply the values in this constructor. And so really this is the same as you would normally instantiate any class, but instead of using the constructor name, the class name, we use the name we want for the particular value. Oopsie daisy. And so what this does, this enhanced enum, is now all our data associated to each value is in one place. Easily maintainable, easily changed. We can see exactly what's happening. And this is one of the beautiful things about enums. And what this does is now, instead of us having this class where we obviously have a variable holding this value, we don't have those switch statements anymore. We don't have different places in our code base where we're switching on this value to determine different pieces of data. It's all consolidated into a single place. But there's more.
There's more. I thought you were done.
Enums have built-in methods or properties, right? So this is exactly the same as we had before, but you notice I created this method to help us appreciate these built-in methods. You see, when I call idle or loading or complete, I can call dot index. I can access this index property. What is this index property? Well, it's the index of that particular value in the full list of enum values, right? In the order you have declared them here at the top. So idle, because it's first, will be index 0. Leading, which is second, will be index 1. Complete, third item, index 2. These enum values also have a built-in dot name property, which simply will get the name of the enum in the code, but as a string. So idle.name returns idle as a string, loading.name, loading as a string, complete.name, complete as a string. And then perhaps one of the best built-in properties is this values property. You'll notice here, I'm not supplying a particular enum value. I'm providing the enum type, the class, as it were, of the enum class. And so what I can do to make this look better, since we are in this enum, we can simply just write values. And what this is an iterable, close to a list, similar to a list, of all the items, of all the values in this enum. So if we were to call values.toList, it would give us a list where the first item is idle, the second is loading, and the third is complete. One of the most useful built-in properties. And we can use these built-in properties in a number of ways to make things cleaner and simpler for us. Some simple examples, not that you would probably use this, but just to highlight it, we could create a previous enum method on the enums, on the enum values, so that it will get the enum before it if it exists. And how we work this out is by checking, is this enum, whichever enum this is being called on, so let's say idle.previous enum, if its index is 0, meaning it's the first enum, well then there's nothing before it. But in all other cases, we use the values property to get an iterable, similar to a list, and we just get the previous item. In a similar way, we can create, notice that this is a static method, right? This is not called on a particular value, but it is called on the so-called class itself, get by message, where we can supply the message, and we will use the values, built-in values property, to get the first value where this message equals the enum values message. And so showing this in use outside of this enum class, we can see, same as before, we have this loading status, which is an enum value. We can call .previous enum on the value. We can call this not on the value, but it's a static method, meaning we will put loading state enhanced methods, .get by message, and we can supply the message and it will return what that enum is. And then we obviously have the loading status .index and .name. And so really enums are so powerful, right? We see how they make things simpler, safer, easier to read, easier to maintain. And so when should our mind trigger us to say, listen,
This is my moment.
this should be an enum, not just some value? Well, when we see a situation, like we showed in these examples we've discussed, when we see a situation where there's only a select number of possible states or values, and those values are all constant or exactly the same, unchangeable, right? Then we will pretty much always use an enum rather than using a string, rather than using an int, double, or so forth. When should we use enhanced enums? Enhanced enums are those with those extra functionality, extra properties, methods, and so forth. Well, whenever we have additional data, variables, behavior that is associated or connected with each enum value. So in our case, we had 3 enums, each with a different message. Well, in that case, we would use enhanced enums to link that data in the enum rather than somewhere else. And we can always use advanced enums, the extra functionality of methods, getters, to just consolidate the information, all the methods and codes, into one place and make it easier to use throughout our code base. And so that's enums, the perfect solution to, well, not everything.
Bruh.
Right? Look at this example. We have 4 enum values, idle, loading, but wouldn't it be nice if we could have a progress indicator in our app? And so if we could store in this a double or an int indicating the progress, or perhaps with the error enum value, wouldn't it be cool if we could have a message that could display to the user? Can enums do this? Well, practically no. There's a hack around it, but well, you just wouldn't do that. And so that's where enums end. When we get into this territory, Well, that is where sealed classes are there for the win.
I heard you was looking for me.
Sealed classes will be discussed in the next video.